like what's in the Bible and all the healing stories, they are just bullshit. And I was just tricking myself into a reality because I couldn't bear the reality and so on. And in this moment, it all turned into hate and I broke with God. But at the beginning, it was more a feeling of, I'm breaking with God and I really want to hurt him or I want to destroy him.
Esther Maria Magnis is a German writer whose book With or Without Me is a memoir of her journey with faith and the perception of reality.
To me, it felt like God had killed my father and wants me to call him dad. I would have listened to every angel. I would have walked on the water. I would have opened the roof and, of course, leave my father down there. I would have done everything. And whatever I could as a teenager, I did. And that's why after my father died, I broke with God because I just couldn't believe in him anymore.
Just tell us sort of about that. What did that feel like for you?
I have to say, it felt like
Hello and welcome to the final episode of Season 6 of the Re-Enchanting podcast. The podcast brought to you by Seen and Unseen. I am Belle Tyndall.
And I'm Justin Briley.
And we are back to once again talk about our favourite topic, re-enchantment, to wonder whether our world is disenchanted and whether it can seek re-enchantment in the Christian story once more.
Yeah, and we have a fabulous guest joining us for this final episode of the season. Esther Maria Magnis is a German writer whose book With or Without Me is a memoir of her journey with faith and the perception of reality. German philosopher Robert Spiemann wrote about the book, "I have not known anyone since Nietzsche who shows so shockingly what a catastrophe it is to not believe in God." Written with unflinching honesty, it takes us through her childhood and adolescence as she, along with her brother and sister, deal with the grief of her father's cancer diagnosis. It's about her prayers, her journey with the loss of faith into materialism, self-deconstruction, and finally a turn back to the idea of God. Today we'll be talking to Esther about her book, this very raw account of coming to terms with God through both the beauty of life, also the ugliness of death, and even the apparent silence of God. So yeah, it's a real biggie to end the season with, isn't it?
It is. Hi, Esther.
hello.
How are you?
I'm pretty excited, but very grateful that you invited me and read my book.
Oh my goodness, yes. So our question is always the same. And it's always, what are you reading at the moment? And if the question was turned on me, my answer is you. I'm nearly finished with your book. Yeah. And it is blowing me away. It's so amazing. But Esther, you tell us, what are you reading at the moment?
Yeah, I heard about this cruel question that you were asking. Yes, even a mother of 4. So I thought I'd be honest, and it's this book I'm reading.
The tiger that came to tea.
You know it, right? It's Judith.
Yes.
And I'm reading this. I started to read The Other Swiss, just because you invited me to the podcast, The Other Swiss, Asylum and Activism in 1973. It might be a little bit related to your topic, Justin, about the Christianity that is coming back and if it's right-wingish or not. And this is a little bit left-wingish Christianity here.
Okay.
Very on topic.
Yeah.
So I like that it goes from that to the tiger that came to tea. That's just a working mum's reality, isn't it?
Yes, but
yes,
I only started this because of you. And
so you had something other than a child's story book to talk about. Yeah.
But then I noticed that my husband is reading this book to me by Sasha Stanishit's Heritage. I think it's translated into English because in England we always stop watching Netflix, which is very hard. And I fall asleep with this book very nicely, and it's written beautifully. And these 2 books are books I'm really reading for work because I'm actually writing a new book about how we cultivate our lives as Christians during the year, celebrating and fasting and everything.
And for the benefit of people who are just listening via podcast and didn't see the covers that you showed us there, what are those last two books you mentioned, Esther?
This is a collection. It's called the Festival Celebration. It's a collection of theory and systematic, and collection of essays about the theory of what is a celebration, and
good
philosophical, sociological, and other essays about it. Some thoughts about it. And this is very interesting too. It's Byung-Chul Han, the loss or the fading of rituals. Here,
yes, I can see. Yeah, and it literally, it's like the rituals are literally fading on the front cover there. I love it when guests bring like show and tell books, you know, when they actually have the books to hand so they can wave the covers for us. But it's lovely to see that, Esther. I love the fact that your husband is reading one of those books to you. It's like having your own personal audiobook, is it? You know,
it's really nice. Yeah, he's doing it very good. And we said we're going to read, both of us is going to read in the evening, but it ends up like he's the only one who's doing it.
Fair enough. Yeah. Wonderful stuff. Well, that's great to hear about the variety of books there. And your own book is interestingly divided into 3 sections: red, white, and black. Before we go into the subject matter of the book, I never quite worked out exactly what the references may be there. Perhaps I'm missing something, Esther. Tell us what are the reference to the red, white, and black different sections of your own book?
Yeah, that's the funny thing that I didn't know myself until the book was published. And I heard a German radio show about literature, and they were talking about the book because when I started to write the book, I didn't know what to write about because I just had the contract with the publishing house, which was a secular publishing house, and they wanted to have the voice or something, and so I had no idea what I'm going to write. I didn't have the urge to write a book, so I asked somebody who was a writer, and he told me that sometimes you can, if you want to write intuitively, you can take an order out of reality that is there already, and then you organize your writing in this order because there's a natural order in some, for example, colors. Or you take a street and the houses are there already, and you just fill it with stories or something like this. And so I was lying in bed, and like how you do it very often, half praying, half thinking, and almost falling asleep. And I was it came up to me, it's going to be red, and then it came white, and then I knew red is blood and white like snow, and then came black, and I wasn't really aware of that it's the story of what's it in English, Snow White, the fairy tale, the German fairy tale.
Yes, yeah.
And I didn't really get it. I thought, it might fit because I kind of had taken a bite of this poisoned apple too, and was alive but dead at the same time. So, but I didn't really get it, and I didn't really care because I just needed the order, and then I started to write. But what I heard now later in this radio podcast was that the first section, red, is, I describe very much my childhood. It's red as blood. What you experience in your childhood, the strength of life and the yearning for life and everything to understand reality, but then also the suffering of my father when he got cancer. And this turns then into white as snow when my father died, and the whole world, I really lost the whole world. It got just blank. And at the morning when my father had died, that morning there was so much snow outside, and but it also reflects how it felt. Like death is the huge equalizer. You have no hierarchy anymore. I broke with God, so there was really no hierarchy of values in my life anymore, and I how do you say this? And it felt like, I think I wrote this in the book, it felt like whenever I tried to make sense out of anything in this meaningless world, it felt like my mind tries to draw or to write with a chalk on glass. And nothing stayed. And so this is the whitest snow. And it's all like how you perceive reality a little bit. And so at the end, and this is something that was really new for me, and I liked the idea, and I think he's right, this radio guy. He says, black as ebony. Is it ebony?
Ebony, yes.
Ebony, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Black as ebony is the frame. The mother of Snow White is sitting on a window and is thinking about this child. And ebony is the frame that comes back when I turn back to God. So reality gets framed again and is getting a hierarchy again, or how do you say? Evolves again. You say that? I don't know.
Yeah.
And so I think this is, and then black, of course, because so reality is coming back. It's fully coming back. I'm even turning to Christ, to Jesus. And then my brother dies, and
it's really helpful actually, and even though you've obviously explained it, I kind of had almost intuited that myself as I was reading through that this was sort of the framework that perhaps these colours represented. I mean, the book is, you know, it is quite extraordinary. It's poetic. It's written in such a way that it really draws you in to your experiences, your inner life. It sort of took me back to being a child and an adolescent, and it sort of made me feel the way it felt then. And the way that you write, for me, it's almost like it's not so much an adult reflecting back on their experience of adolescence. It's like you put yourself into that experience and you're just directly kind of channeling what you felt, the way that you experienced God and so on. Without trying to sort of, without trying to process it almost too much in hindsight. And I just found that really, really interesting and captivating, the way this book is written. So thank you. We're going to actually spend a little bit of the program today reading some extracts from the book, because I did appreciate them so much. And right near the beginning, you talk about a sort of your initial, I suppose, experience of God as a young child. You're staying at the ocean, it's night, your parents and siblings are in a restaurant behind the promenade along the beach. And this is what you describe. You say, there were no lights, just the moon on the water shining from far behind me. I hummed along with the sound of the waves and looked out across the broad beach all the way to the narrow strip in the distance where the gleam of the water ended and the dark of the sky began. The cosmos. I don't know whether I already knew that word. While I was watching, the depth of the heavens, something you glean when you stare at the stars, began to grow right in front of me. It was a sensation I'd never known. It was utterly new to me. The sound of the waves didn't soften, but seemed to take another direction. Their whoosh was no longer toward me, to my little place on top of the rock, but rather outward, into the distance. The rocks and the sea, the glimmer on the water's surface, the stars and everything behind me, all of this lay at the feet of what was bearing down from the new depth of sky. I felt like an unnoticed part of this whole, and I found it beautiful. I waited and watched, though I had no idea what was actually happening. Inside of me, without consonants, without vowels, my name. The world wasn't stepping back, but I was stepping forward, out of it, out from the night, because my name was echoing within me. The entire time it had a gravity that was loving and at the same time absolute, unconditional. And in its lingering gaze there was something indescribable, something heartening, that gave me the feeling I had to take myself seriously, a knowledge of myself that I couldn't fathom. Encouraging and at the same time approving, authorizing. I was so astonished that I have no idea how long I sat there. And then all of a sudden I was pretty sure and burst out, "You're God?" Thinking, that's God. That's what adults mean when they talk about him. because I found his devotion and affection so touching, I raised my hand from the warm rock and gave him a little wave.
Oh, I love that.
Take it away, Belle. What was your feeling on the back of that?
Oh, I love the idea. So basically, I've been reading your book, and I said to my partner last night, I was like, you need to read this because it's everything that you want to do and say towards God in the highest of highs, like when you believe him and he's loud, and in the lowest of lows where he's silent and hard to believe in. And I just think that the idea in that moment that he felt so real to you that you felt the need to just wave at him, I think that's so it's so beautiful. I guess I have so many questions, but I guess with that, the one I'd love to ask you is, you're someone, and like Justin has said, we'll read snippets out from your book, because just to say, it was originally written in German, wasn't it? And we are reading back to you an English translation, a beautifully poetic English translation. But I suppose, can I just ask you, what is faith to you? Because I think you write about faith all the way through this book from different angles. Sometimes you have it, sometimes you feel like you don't have it so much, sometimes you want it, sometimes you don't want it. And I suppose to you, Esther, like, what is faith?
Now I would say it's grace, because especially with the experience of very dark times, maybe we're talking about this later, but for example, when my little brother was suffering from cancer and was screaming in agony and so on, I knew that I'm losing my faith. It was not like even you can have the best philosophical argument in the end, which we don't really have. But I mean, even if you'd find it, it's not the only organ inside of you that perceives reality or answers to reality. And I think faith is something like, we have a German philosopher, I think, Hartmut Rosa, who speaks about the resonance, that we are just resonating to reality somehow. That's how I would describe it. It's God is behind and in reality, or is the beginning of reality, and so you're resonating to this. And so I would say now, with the experience of my brother who was in agony, I noticed I'm losing my faith here, because if my brother is dying, I want to believe, and I can have this strong decision, because sometimes I find faith is a decision. You just say, okay, no, I'm believing this now, even the virgin birth and everything, and you're doing this almost evolutionary jump in your consciousness, or it's very easy, and you're just answering, like, and this is, I think, I like this part of the book very much too, because it was just very easy. It was a very natural experience, and overwhelming at the same time, but it deepened my self-awareness and my consciousness. And but now during the dark times, I would say it's sometimes it's just grace, because that's what I wanted to say with my brother. When I ran outside the house and I was so desperate because he was suffering so badly, I knew I'm losing faith now, and I told God, and what happened was that it started to grow the next day. So I don't know what.
Well, we'll come to this part of the story, but really the book begins with another very dark period of your life, when in your late teens your father was diagnosed with cancer himself, and you get the feeling you're a very close family with your brother and sister. And again, there's a kind of sense in which even that childlike encounter with God that is, in a sense, quite pure, even by your teenage years, I think you're becoming more encumbered with the sense of what is God? How do I pray to God? And so on. But there's this fascinating kind of account of just this bubbling up from within you as you struggle, with the grief that comes with your father's cancer diagnosis, of this desire to pray. And just tell us sort of about that. What did that feel like for you? And then we'll read a little bit in a moment of the account you tell of going with your siblings to pray for your father.
Yeah, that was, my parents told us on Christmas that, or they waited the Christmas Eve. They knew my father was going to die. He only had 3 months left. And they waited Christmas Eve. They didn't want to ruin this for us, but then they had to tell us very quickly at the first Christmas day. Because it wasn't clear if it was 3 weeks or 3 months. And so they told us on Christmas, and then we drove in the holidays. We drove the whole way down to Black Forest, where my grandmother has a little house, and the whole family was there. And I just noticed, as a normal teenager, you're praying like you understand that God might have another way that you have, but maybe it would be nice if he would do what you want, or, this praying. There are different forms of praying, like in church with many relative sentences, or like when we pray in church for the sick. That's also something special, because very often we pray, dear God, there are many people who are suffering badly and who are dying. And then we are not praying, please heal them. We just pray, please send some people to their beds, which are nice. So this prayer is a very safe prayer.
Yes.
And so all these different ways of praying, and then the influence by the enlightened, I don't know if enlightened is the right word, but on the one hand, teachers were telling you Jesus didn't walk on the water, and you have to see all the healing miracles, this and that way.
This kind of desire to cast everything as metaphorical rather than sort of literal. Yes.
And like seeing the if he made a blind one see again, it was just taking away his blindness for social needs, which I find a pretty bad example for a blind person who's really suffering. And so this didn't help me a lot as a teenager. In my father is dying of cancer, so what am I going to do? And but I noticed that, but of course I was influenced by all of this, and I didn't know what to do. And what I felt was, I woke up in the morning, I felt I want to keep my papa. I want to keep my dad. And then I went downstairs, brushed my teeth, and I spit the toothbrush in the, sink. And I noticed, I want to keep my father. I need to keep my father. I want to keep daddy. And that's how it continued, while I was spreading the butter on my bread. I want to keep my father. And I became the prayer. And so for the first time in my life, I really I had the feeling with every hair and cell of my body and blood, everything in me turned or wove, like this prayer wove itself together. Can you say this? And then was like a sail that suddenly started to turn a little bit towards God. And then I knew God. And this is where I direct my whole existence now. So, and this is what youth does very often. You throw yourself in like crazy. I mean, my little son came home from soccer yesterday and he couldn't walk anymore. So because he was so exhausted, I had to drag him upstairs and help him to climb in bed because he was just so exhausted, because he threw himself, he put his all energy in it. And that's what I did with my faith and with God when my father got sick. Yeah.
Perhaps, Belle, you could read a little bit of the account of when Esther actually communicated this desire to pray to her brother and sister, and they turned out had a similar desire growing in them, and so they went up to their grandmother's attic. So let's see that.
Absolutely, yes. So I had the urge to pray, but I didn't know what to say or how. I didn't want to hear my voice. I figured it would never be able to adequately express what I felt. that the belief in my heart would never manage to will itself into shape between my tongue and gums. I was afraid my voice would just be left hanging in the air. It was a fear I'll bet many people know. Kind of like when you want to say, I love you, and you really mean it, but it comes out so clumsily, foolishly lingering there in space, unworthy of being believed, parroting itself, that it's embarrassing. I was afraid that once my prayer was voiced, I'd have to watch it break apart and fall to the floor like crumbs, or dissipate in midair. And once that happened, I'd no longer be living between bad news and a prayer, but be left facing nothing but uncertain terror. More silence. It contained our collective waiting, perhaps for one of us to just begin saying something. But these moments passed. It was too serious to just start talking. One of our stomachs made a noise. We had never sat together like this, but we got through it. Those minutes when people might let out a sigh, or cross one leg over the other, or fidget like people do in church or at concerts, we stayed silent for minutes on end. And then our silence suddenly grew still, and out of it came a tugging. It wasn't my siblings waiting for me to speak. They weren't waiting for me, and nor was I waiting for them. No, in that silence, a calm emerged, a peaceful patience. It was not our waiting any more. It was his. The peace of mind that filled this patience wasn't one we ourselves could feel. This peacefulness wasn't ours, but we knew that it was the truth.
It's a beautiful description, Esther, of this moment when you start to pray with your siblings, and you continue to pray in that attic over coming weeks. I think you were perhaps not allowing your parents to know that it was happening, that it was, so you were sort of trying to do it sort of semi in secret, but eventually your father got wind of it, and he said, what do you guys keep going up to that attic for? And you told him, and he wept when he heard what you had been doing for him, and even came to join you to pray as well. But your father did die from the cancer. Where did that leave you? Because there's a sense in which it becomes very clear in the book that there were no, as you put it, excuses for it. That you didn't find the reasoning, the platitudes of either believers or non-believers who tried to kind of maybe take away the sting of it. It didn't make any difference. So what was sort of going on for you at that point when you had prayed, and had these moments and these experiences, and your father did, live longer than had been expected, but eventually the time came. What happened in your life at that point?
Before my father died, we were praying like this, but before he died, I had to go to a boarding school with Jesuits because he had to start a new therapy somewhere in South Germany. And during the time we had to do homework, I was very desperate because of my father and his suffering. And then I opened up the Bible and asked God, please tell me something. I need to know what I should do. And I opened up the Bible at this page where it says, if you want this, and I think Jesus himself said this, if you want the mountain to rise and throw itself into the sea, it will do it. If you've just asked as if you've gotten it already. And so I really trusted that. I really trusted the Bible, and I prayed like this. Then I started to thank God for healing my father. And from my perspective, I would have done everything. I'm not sure if you're going to read it, but I would have listened to every angel. I would have walked on the water. I would have, opened the roof, and of course leave my father down there. I would have done everything. I would have crawled through on the ground just to touch Jesus. I would have really done anything. And whatever I could as a teenager, I did. And that's why after my father died, I broke with God, because I just couldn't believe in him anymore.
Mm.
But at the same time, at the beginning, I have to say, it felt like as if there were two rocks. Like one is the reality of my father had died and had suffered horrible, and the other is what I've experienced with God. They were still very high, and my mother told us my mother was not desperate at the beginning. She came home and she was so carried by the moment when my father had died, because she said it was the pure presence of God. And she's not super devout. Do you say that? I don't know.
Mm.
But that's just how she experienced it. She asked, "But if you need to take my husband, then let it happen quick." So,
Wow.
and then my father took a deep breath, and then he died. And she said the whole room was fulfilled with love and with God's presence. So, and I was looking at her. I heard that, but I thought she's crazy now. And because for me, death was really the destroyer there. And so it felt like these two rocks, like there at the beginning, when I then broke with God, there was the reality of his presence I've experienced during my childhood and when I was a teenager once in a while was very strong, and I still took it seriously. So I couldn't easily say at the beginning, no, there is no God. So at the beginning, when I then was invited to a wedding of friends of my parents, and the groom was staying in front of the altar, and everybody was waiting for the bride, I was this sadness of mine had turned into hate slowly. And I was waiting for the bride too, and then the organ. Do you say organ? I don't know. The music
Okay.
started, and everybody, the heads were turning towards the entrance of the church, and in came the bride with her father next to her, holding her hand, and he was so proud, and like all the love that parents might feel or a father has there, and was walking. They were passing me, and in this moment, it all turned into hate, and I broke with God. But at the beginning, it was more a feeling of I'm breaking with God, and I really want to hurt him, or I want to destroy him. I don't know.
Yeah.
And I had the feeling of it felt like God had killed my father and wants me to call him dead. And this was just, I thought, you're not my father. I had one.
Yeah.
But then it did turn into atheism later. But at the beginning, I just stood in front of these two reality, and my mind played ping pong between it. And then I chose to just kill one of these rocks in order to be free, or I don't know. Yeah.
That was gonna be my question. Firstly, can you remind me how old you were when your dad died?
I was 17 then.
Yeah, that's
14,
yeah.
15. Yeah.
That was going to be my next question. Is you said, I didn't believe in God, and my question was going to be, when you say that, is it that you don't believe? Is it that you got to a point where you didn't believe he was there? He didn't exist? He wasn't real? Or was it more that when you say you didn't believe in God, is it more that you didn't believe that he was good and that he loved you and that he was all of the things you'd been grown up to think he was? Or was it a journey from one, like a stepping stone to the other?
I think I went through many different ideas, but at the beginning it was more, I couldn't easily say there is no God because I had experiences with him.
Yeah.
And but then the death was so loud and so cruel, and that I understood, no, it's all like what's in the Bible and all the healing stories, they are just bullshit. And I was just tricking myself into a reality because I couldn't bear the reality and so on. And then I took care. I became an atheist, and I was very consequent with it. I didn't allow anything into my new world that was not true and real, which was a very materialistic worldview, which has its borders, but I didn't know that. And I'm very fascinated by still, I think now the younger atheists are much more open about the borders of atheism, and they discuss it and are not so missionary like they were in the time then in the 90s when I thought about these things, because it really at that time they were in Germany, they were on a mission, like it was a little bit like a church, and they would do the difference between do you believe or do you think? And so I considered myself to be somebody who thinks, and then I only allowed materialistic things into my reality, which meant I wasn't really there anymore. Because if you cut out the whole invisible world, and if you stop believing in the soul, if you stop believing in values, then you can try to make, I don't know. Yeah, I think I got what philosophers would call this problem of what is it? Epistemology undermines ontology or something like this. And I think this is what happened. If you don't take yourself seriously anymore, and if you have the feeling that you're just the summary of some atoms bumping in each other, and it's just what evolution created. Evolution created it for me to survive. It has nothing to do with truth. It has nothing to do. I thought I might be just caught in my own self-digesting reality and truth and so on. So that's what I meant when I said I was really consequent about. And I see the young atheists like Alex O'Connor now talking about these topics, and they say with, these shiny eyes, I can't sleep, I can't find sleep over this and so on. But this is one point: you need a strong ego to play with these things. But if you don't have this value anymore, that I once said in an interview, I overstepped the line backwards of what God said. I think that's the beginning of every moral, that God, after he created the world, he said it was all good, or he saw that it was all good. If you don't see this, then it's really hard. And if you don't see that life itself is good, then you can't create any moral out of it. Because and you can't, because you don't take yourself seriously, then reality starts to fade too. And that's what happened to me. I couldn't say this is a desk anymore, and I couldn't say Esther anymore.
Yeah. You described this sort of journey almost as this happening almost overnight. And it takes place actually, significantly just almost exactly a year, I think, after the death of your father. You there's a chapter where you describe turning up in quite a disheveled, drunken state to an Easter sunrise service that your mother and siblings had gone along to. But you had been at an all-night drinking session, basically, in the woods, stumbling home through the forest. Obviously, this was all connected with the grief you felt a year on from your father's death. But yeah, there's this sense you talk about this silence from God. So I sometimes found it difficult to work out whether you had kind of descended, as you said, into full-blown kind of materialist atheism, or were just sort of really angry at God and were just sort of not on speaking terms anymore. But it sounds like it did become more the former, that you had kind of completely rejected, for a time at least, the idea of God.
Yeah.
And I suppose my question then is, what changed? Because you go on to say in a subsequent chapter, no lightning struck in the years following Dad's death, no voice rumbled forth in thunder, no hot coals burned my tongue, no Christ came to me in a dream, no sea parted, no pillar of fire appeared, and no wind whispered. There was no choir of angels, not even a lone angel, nor was my name called by God. There was nothing. God was silent. And then you say this very interestingly, and I will never forget that silence. Today, I sometimes think there is a power in his silence, a power we cannot even imagine. Where did that come from? Because most people in that materialist atheist state would say, well, the silence is just evidence that God is not there. And yet you seem to say, no, there was something else about this silence.
Yeah, I say this now. At that time, I would have said, it's a sign that he's not there. And I would have said life is absurd, and you have to. I remember I had really bad depressions, and I had to see a psychiatrist, and I never understood why everybody. I mean, my whole surrounding, they didn't believe in God, but I was problematic because they all said life is meaningless. There is no meaning. Life is absurd, and I was the one who was living it with my depression, and I was kind of expressing it, and it was, I don't know, that's what I meant with the younger atheists, what I like about them talking about the borders of atheism, but I still wonder where they get all the power, and or I envy them for the power they have to gamble with these, because for me it was all very earnest, and I really suffered from it, and I lost myself in it. And I remember my mother put me into a train that brought me to Hamburg to my sister because I needed to go to university, but it didn't matter anymore, nothing mattered. And so I couldn't do anything anymore. There's a good movie about how depression shows itself. It's called Melancholia. I don't know if you've seen it. And this woman who is so depressed she's almost like this and can't go to the bathtub alone anymore. She, at the end of the movie, becomes very proud and strong because a planet crashes Earth. So she was right. The whole depression was right, and I felt like this too. Like I was almost, I was not able to do anything of all this vivid stuff everybody was doing, and that everybody found a little sense in life and a little meaning in life, and I just couldn't give myself this meaning because I thought oh, come on, I'm not a baby who plays with a doll who says this is daddy now. I'm not. This is not how I can treat life. And so when I was at my sister, she brought me. She had the great idea to bring a depressed person to a Camus theater show, and we watched. She was so lovely. She was taking care of me and was very afraid of that. Yeah, I wouldn't make it. But when we watched Camus, it was The Plague, and they had put it on stage. And I remember sitting there being, yeah, of course he's right. Because I was depressed with everything. I had broken with God. Life is absurd. It's disgusting how that there is a creature like a human being that wakes up consciously just to look around and see, I'll be gone soon. I just thought this is so cruel. I wouldn't do this to my child, and just to give him a toy and then to say, but it's going to be gone in a minute again. So this waking up seemed to be something cruel to me. And I watched Camus, and I had the same feeling like with all other atheists, like it's all true, but where do you get the power? Because I'm feeling like this, and that's why I see a psychiatrist, and I can't get up in the morning and brush my teeth. So where do you get the power and the meaning to bring all this horrifying things on stage to tell everybody? I just didn't get the strength of the ego they had. And yeah.
Wow.
But I'm sorry, I think I really missed your question.
No. But everything you've said is helpful there to kind of give a sense of what was going on for you. But as I say, you said that ultimately this silence actually in a strange way spoke to you. There was, so what, how did, as it were, what was the key, if there was anyone, to kind of drawing you out of this long period of this nihilistic sense of the absurdity of life?
I noticed when I was writing that I'm not writing the clean, rational storyline here. And I think you can talk about philosophical suicide. I don't know if Camus even did that, saying this, that it was philosophical suicide to turn about. But I might have done this, and that gave way again to other parts in consciousness that perceives reality, I would say. But at that time, when I was not believing in God, there was this moment when I used this moment because I can't get closer into, I think it happened, that the turn in me happened on such a silent, hidden platform, that I can't really grab it. But there is a moment, or there are some moments where I think I can describe something that happened. And one moment was when I was sitting after my father died, we took my grandmother in the house, and we had to take care of her. And I was singing her. I was singing her every night, all the children's songs that she knew, and she was so sweet and funny, and it was such a sad time. I remember when we were trying to walk outside with my grandmother, and then we had this very old dog who couldn't really walk, so my mother was but driving my grandmother in the wheelchair, and behind that I was holding the back legs of our dog because he wouldn't be able to walk anymore. And we were this little sad parade walking the street. And I was a teenager, and I knew others had so much power and energy to do some nice things. But that was just how my life was. And so because she was brought into my life, I sometimes sat next to her bed in the evening, and I just watched her breast going up and down by breathing, during the breathing. And I took care that she was still breathing, which is also not the best thing to do as a teenager all of the time. But so I was really controlling and taking care of that. The little bit of reality in life that is there has to work and be pure and clean and whatever. And so one night I was sitting at my grandmother's bed. I was singing her the songs like I did, and I did it over and over again, and I wouldn't leave the bed, and I felt the staring of, I don't know, the cupboard, and then there was the lamp and everything. And then we've started singing again, a very old song I sang when I was a little child. And suddenly in this song, in the refrain, I guess, popped up a combination of words that for me as a child was one word. And in German it's called Kenn doch dich. And I don't know, but it shocked me, because it reminded me of the feeling that this word gave me when I was a very small child. And it reminded me of myself, this experience at the sea, what I was talking about, that there is this calm. And in the experience at the sea, when I was standing at the ocean, I had a very fond relationship to the ocean already, and I was playing with him a lot. But this was what I saw, what I experienced at the ocean then was much bigger. And the strange thing was that I was a child, but it felt grown up without any of this narcissism that if you imagine a grown up as a child, then it's something different. But it was very, very old at the same time, what I felt like myself and what was bending down, or I don't know. And this moment at my grandmother's bed was maybe a second of a memory of the self, and the self was the thing that was decomposed with all the materialistic thoughts I had about myself before. So I wouldn't say my name anymore. I didn't take it seriously, because it was just there was no self. I didn't believe in a true self. I thought it's whatever, I don't know. So this was a reminder of there is something that you're missing dearly or sadly, but that passed again. And that's how it was at the sea too. It opened up, and then suddenly it was gone, and you couldn't hold it and and keep it, And this moment with my grandmother at my grandmother's bed was like this too. Afterwards, I had my cigarette, and I knew I can't hold it up, and be one of these brave people who are strong and play with thoughts. For me, my thoughts became reality, and as a reality I was suffering from. And then there was this other moment I'm describing in the book, the morning when the deers, since my father had died, the animals wouldn't respect our house anymore, and they would come very close to the house and would destroy everything. And the deers always ate the roses in my mother's garden. So one morning I had to go to school, and I saw there was a deer staying in the garden. I took one of the rotten tennis balls of our dog, and no, at first I said "hey," and I tried to shush it away, and it just wouldn't leave, as if there was nobody there. That triggered something in me, because this deer, by treating me like there is nobody, was exactly the way I felt. But shortly before, this memory at my grandmother's bedside had turned up. So there was a sense of myself already. And I got a little bit angry, and I took one of these rotten tennis balls of our dog, and I threw it towards the deer. And it started to run very elegantly, and then turned like, was there something? Did I, a mosquito or something? And that triggered some kind of, I think, energy that you need to survive your own atheistic thoughts, because you really need to love yourself a lot to spread, to say that life is meaningless, but here I am, and missionize the world. You need a lot of power inside of you to feel the urge to do this and the need to do this. And so, I think these little moments, they were working on me. And then the silence, Justin, you were talking about, later on turned into something, and I still have these moments sometimes, into something very loud and frightening. Because that's also something, if you believe in God, and you experience something very horrible, then you cannot look at it and separate it from God, because it's happening in His world. And what happens with me, and I still have this, or I still experience this, is that I'm looking at suffering in the world, and it just takes away my breath if I then think of God, that He really allows it. Because that's what I found at that time, when I turned back to God, was the feeling that I have to. I found a deep respect towards reality, like the whole reality, not the one that I want. Not only God heals everybody in a second, and not the reality of everything is dark and there is no meaning and so on, but the very, very strange reality that you can perceive through different eyes, philosophically, but also at these moments on the sea and so on. And that still steals my breath. And I still have moments sometimes when I tell God that I'm very afraid of Him, because all this with the suffering, and how Jesus suffered, I don't even want Him to come down and suffer. It's really, really difficult to accept that He's doing this. Although I find it's the most beautiful narrative I've ever heard about a God. And it's what I also would do with my children if I can't give them the whole information about why. Because we were talking about this, if you tell your child, you really have to wear a jacket because it's cold outside, and the child will continue to ask, you can decide if you just say, no, you have to wear the jacket, or you start to explain death. You will get sick, you will die. So the child, and this will damage the child. The child will not be able to carry this information. And sometimes that's a very bad explanation, but sometimes to me it feels like the question of suffering with God feels like this, that you don't get the whole information theoretically, but what you get is what you say as a parent is, you see, I'm taking this jacket on myself too, or you bend down to the child and just sit with it. And that's what God did. And that's what
Wow. Is that what we mentioned earlier very briefly about your brother also suffering hugely and you losing him? And is it, you mentioned that you felt yourself losing your faith again, and then you told God so, and then that changed. And I'm wondering, was that the difference this time, that you had this in your mind, and so you were able to kind of say to God, I hate that this happens and that this happens on your watch, and then weirdly that stopped you losing faith in him? Is that right?
That what I stopped losing faith in. Yeah. No, not even losing faith in him. My faith grew. So I told him, and I think I was invited to a big conference last year, and I was talking about disappointed prayers. And I think this is the only solution that I have for suffering is, what happens in this moment when you're deeply disappointed is what I just said about these rocks. You have this one rock, because if you've have experiences with God, after the older you get, and the more experience you have with God, it gets difficult to ignore it after a while, because you have this one rock where you believe what God loves me and it's true, and then you have the other rock that tells the difference, which is the cruel reality of somebody dies, for example. And what you can do in these situations is what Christians do very often is, I wrote down the word for it. They create little theologian suspension bridges, in order to explain why somebody is suffering. And I think we need to talk about it, of course, and philosophically it's very interesting, and theologically, of course. But in real life, people come up with ideas that are so sick, and answers to why we are suffering or why somebody is suffering. They throw it out so easily. So in these little theological suspension bridges, they don't carry. And they are not the way out of the valley. And the only way to get out of the valley, in my experience, is you need to get through these rocks, but they are so close together. They are two huge realities, the reality of God and the reality of suffering. And the only thing that finds its way through it is, in the end, tears. And I think what one has to do, and I'm not doing this because I'm a very, maybe like an aggressive child, I say no very fast. But what I think what you should do is, instead of building a bridge, climbing out, is touching the ground of disappointment and feeling it. And because they're on the fallen, do you say that, on the fallen ground? Or on this dark, dusty, ugly, cold ground is and I have to check the word, the hem of God's. You say this?
Yes,
Yep.
the hem
hem
of the robe.
garment.
Is in reality, and if you're not interested in reality and even in your disappointed reality, and you just throw your projections on him, then you will not get to his reality, and that's the way through the valley, I have the feeling. But it leads you through the feeling of disappointment and the tears and everything. But it is important to know, that's what I can say now, his hem really starts in this ugly, dark reality. And although I know it, I kind of hate it too, because I don't want to suffer ever again in my whole life. But
Um, just one final question, even though we could talk to you all day, because I know there are huge chunks of it that we still haven't been able to talk to you about. But I'll just say before this final question that of all the books we've spoken about on Re-Enchanting, I think I'd probably recommend this one the absolute most, in particular regards to kind of re-enchanting and what faith is and all of these angles. But my final question, I suppose, is just about this suffering. You write that you were only able to cope with and stand your brother's suffering because at this point you've come to believe that God himself suffered. And I would just love it if you could explain a little bit more what you mean by that.
I've been asking myself if I can explain it, and I think there is one secret about this answer of God. I have the feeling is that you can't give it to somebody else. I cannot. If I try to explain this now, it will sound as stupid as I perceived it when I was a teenager, and I would say it's because I'm suffering so much. I mean, there is what I said before. If you try to teach your child, if you want your child to, if you want to protect your child or so on, it's always the nice way to go down on your knees to the child too. And this is what somebody who loves somebody does, that you try to get on ice, on the height of the ice. And that's what God did, which is so, it is really touching because it feels as if he really is the one who was in love first with the humans and went down as a little child, But what I know, and I think I read this also because I've at C.S. Lewis Narnia, I guess, is that if you're suffering, and that's why it's so tricky to talk about the suffering of the world, you cannot answer the suffering of the world. It's because the only answer you get is in the relationship to God. And it's not an intellectual information that you get, my father had to die because I needed to turn to God, so he took him away, and then I don't know what kind of rationality you want to find. Or Jesus had to go to the cross because you can talk about it, but the real answer is again is a reality that you get the answer for your own suffering in healing. It's not that why would an information, your 14-year-old daughter has been raped and killed, I give you the information now why, and this should help you. I mean, it wouldn't help you. The only thing that goes deeper is healing the wound. And this is something I know that God does because I've experienced it with many other people who were deeply suffering in their lives, like the woman who came to our house and cleaned the house. I loved her very much, but she had experienced nightmares in a war, but she would also talk about God like somebody great and beautiful and loving, but because he secretly told her, or it's a way of talking. That's what I meant with how you perceive the reality of God. It's not always through the head, but it's through the healing as well.
Yep.
And and there's one other thing I experienced after my brother, which I find also really weird, is that because when he was dying, God's presence was so beautiful that today sometimes it's very difficult I always have to call my mother when I talk about it to check if I'm crazy or was it really beautiful, because I'm talking about my brother dying, but this time was it beautiful or was it not? And then my mother says yes, it was, and my sister says yes, because it was just love, and it's but it sounds inappropriate, when I'm talking about it, or it feels inappropriate. And what I noticed after he died, I was running behind God like a bleating sheep, because I wanted to stay in this love and in this closeness and feeling of his presence and so on. And then I had this experience that at some point that God didn't want that. He didn't want me to overstep this line towards him, and that somehow he had sanctified the border of our reality. Do you know what I try to explain? That there are boundaries of our reality we are not to overstep into his direction.
Yeah.
That's a very strong experience that I had. So it's not only pure love and easiness, but I find him very weird too.
It is an extraordinary account, and as I say, we've read just a few passages today, Esther, from With or Without Me, but I do encourage readers to go and find it for themselves. It's in German, it's in English. Is it in other languages as well, Esther?
It's in Dutch and in Portuguese. But yeah.
Well, in whatever your language you read it, I think you'll find it just incredibly poignant, helpful, and it really does get at the God question from inside, if you like, the sense of what it means to encounter God and to encounter the silence of God. But also very relevant as we approach Easter, this idea that actually we only really, as you say, experience an answer to the problem of suffering through the healing and God himself choosing to enter into this suffering. But it's been such a privilege to talk to you. Thank you, Esther, for this time. I know you were somewhat nervous about coming on with, English as a second language and trying to express these deep ideas, but I think you did just an amazing job of doing it. So thank you for doing that for us, and all the very best. We'll make sure there's a link, of course, to the book from today's show. But thank you for being our guest today.
Thank you so much for having me. Goodbye.
And thank you to you, our listeners. You can find so much more about Seen and Unseen at seenandunseen.com. And of course, we say this all the time, but just another thank you that you have made this conversation possible through your wonderful generosity. And so if you would like to make further conversations like this possible, seenandunseen.com/give is where you can go. But from Justin and I, until season 7, we will wish you a very fond farewell.
Goodbye.